So my name is Larry Hopper. I work for the National Weather Service Office, New Braunfels, and here we are with the Spring Climate Outlook webinar. Just as a quick reminder, remember a couple of years back, SPC did update to 5 different categories for severe thunderstorm risk in addition to general thunderstorm, with the marginal and enhanced added to the slight, moderate, and high. And then here's just a little joke about seasonal allergies, how in the springtime we'll have a forecast that says 6% chance of El Nino, then we'll go back to 6% chance of La Nina, and then, you know, who really knows what's going to happen because it's El Nino and it's in the springtime, right? So we're going to talk a little bit today about that spring forecast period, because you've probably heard that there's a chance we may be headed to El Nino at some point over the next few months or into the summer or fall. So that's becoming kind of a big newsmaker in the making. So just kind of recap, for the 90 and 180-day rainfall, if we go back to March 1st and just capture what happened in winter, you can see that most areas were above normal this winter. Really the only tiny exception being down here in southern Maverick County. Everyone was well above normal, in some cases double what the normal rainfall is here in Bexar County and along the escarpment west of Bexar County. If you go back to include the fall rainfall as well, then it becomes a little bit trickier. You definitely have some rainfall deficits here in parts of the Rio Grande Plains. You have some rainfall deficits in the coastal plains, but nothing extremely significant. And then, of course, in the Rio Grande Plains further to the west towards the Edwards Plateau, we actually are above normal. And, of course, the memory of what happened this winter is also being carried over to the 180-day total, including fall as well. So in general, you can see that over the last 90 days, we're above normal. You take the 180 days, we're near normal but slightly below. However, if you were to take out the first week of December, when we had a pretty significant rainfall event where San Antonio actually received over 6 inches, which is in excess of their normal rainfall for the entire winter, and many areas actually received about half their winter total of 3 inches or more, you can see that if you just toggle back and forth, there's quite a big difference between the upper two graphs, where you can see that we have quite a bit of a rainfall deficit over a significant portion of the Rio Grande Plains and even spotty areas up here in the hill country and even parts of Williamson County and Bastrop County. So it's important to note that as we move forward over the next month or two, the memory of this event and even some of the heavier rainfall events that we had in middle of January and a severe weather event in February will start to fall out. And so right now we're good on precip for most areas, which has resulted in a drought monitor that looks pretty clear. But if we don't get some significant rainfall events over the next couple of months, then it's possible that that could start to slip in from a short-term perspective. However, we're not forecasting any drought to reappear over the area, at least not in a more significant sense during the spring. So it's abnormally dry for a very small portion of the Rio Grande Plains, but for the most part, most areas are right around normal for precipitation, and the reservoir levels are right where they should be or slightly above. So in good shape there. So, kind of recapping what happened this winter, we did have a very weak La Nina episode that did just barely meet that 5-month threshold. The 6-month December through February, the ONI average actually fell below negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. So CPC has officially declared this La Nina event to have ended. So if you take a look going back to 2014, you can see that we had a marginal event that almost was El Nino, but not quite. And then over the spring, temperatures really increased, the sea surface temperatures in the East Pacific really increased in the spring, which was one reason we had, from a teleconnection perspective, a very, very wet spring, in many cases the wettest that this region has seen. And that carried over into summer, into the fall, and that very strong El Nino, one of the 3 strongest we've had going back to 1950, began to quickly transition back to neutral conditions by last summer. It fell into the below La Nina threshold by late summer and stayed down in that, during fall, and stayed in that region for much of fall and almost all of winter, before finally coming back out towards the end of winter. So if you take a look at where we were at the last time we did this webinar, back the first week of December, you can see that the anomalies were pretty concentrated with near normal to slightly below normal sea surface temperature anomalies in the central and East Pacific. But then Now we can see that we've pretty much eliminated all of those, and we've developed some above normal anomalies, in some cases quite significant off the coast of Peru, that are in excess of 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. And so the Nino 3.4 region is the official region. That is right now right at 0. Central Pacific is pretty much right around 0 as well. But we are starting to see a little bit of a warming tongue off the coast of Peru that is already 2.2 degrees Celsius above normal in that Nino 1.2, 1+2 region. So a little bit of concern that we may start to develop the potential for some El Nino conditions. However, we'll point out the spring barrier in just a second. Moving forward for spring, though, pretty strong confidence that we're going to stay in ENSO-neutral conditions. Most models are predicting ENSO-neutral conditions for the spring. There's only a handful of some of the CFS runs that are actually predicting us to become in a weak El Nino by the end of spring. But when you take a look at some of the other models, the statistical model blend is mainly showing that we're going to be right and neutral through all of next fall. Whereas this kind of concerning line is this this dynamical average in the yellow, which is kind of hard to see, but if you can follow, I'm going to go real slow, follow the cursor, you can see that that is putting us into weak El Nino once we get into, say, late, very early summer, and then that would continue on into the fall. And so the key take-home message here is that although we should remain ENSO neutral for the spring, there is quite a few number of dynamical models, including the CFS and some of the runs here in the IRI CPC image on the upper right, that are showing that we may transition to El Nino by summer, if not summer, then fall. But the statistical models are predicting ENSO neutral through fall. So there's quite a bit of disagreement in these areas. Having said that, it's important to note that models typically do not predict ENSO cycles very, very well in the spring for really any subsequent season. If you look at the image top here, you can see that springtime model forecasts of summertime ENSO variability are very poor. Matter of fact, statistical models, you can't even really put any stock in until you get to April, and even then they can only really explain about 10% of ENSO variability. The dynamic models are slightly better, but even at best by April they might be able to get the ENSO variability correct about 1/3 of the time. It's not really until we get to about May or June that we can really start to have some strong predictability really for more late fall and early winter. We just don't have very strong predictability except in cases where you have a persistent El Nino that's going to persist through the summer, or we're already La Nina and we think that that's going to persist through the summer. So having said what is occurring in the East Pacific, it could be that that's a short-term fluctuation. These forecasts are typically not very accurate because this is the time of year when the sea surface temperature gradients or differences sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific are quite weak. That results in a very weak coupling between the ocean and atmosphere models, which is a general problem in models anyway, but even more compounded by this transition season, because in the spring our weather is quite variable, which provides a lot of noisy elements to what is otherwise a signal that is kind of going back and forth and hard to parse out, unlike winter when we're pretty much cool, though not this year so much, and summer when we're always warm. When you look at these El Nino forecasts, so I don't want to discount them entirely, simply because we do have quite a bit of deep warm water, which may eventually work its way to the surface, and we do have those waters warming off the coast of Peru. And I don't want to discount the fact that dynamical model skill has been improving over the last several years and trying to overcome this spring barrier to better predict what may occur next fall with respect to ENSO. So it's something that is out there. We'll have to keep monitoring it, but we'll have a much better feel for it once we get into May as the models begin to handle that better. So moving forward into the next 2 weeks or so, I know that this weekend is going to be somewhat wet, at least wetter than normal, and we'll have a front that moves through late Saturday night into Sunday. But behind that front, we will remain what is called northwest flow aloft with a ridge over the western United States, and that is going to result in us having pretty much dry conditions for the next couple weeks, and really above normal temperatures, because it's not like we're going to be getting any real significant fronts through here over the next 7 to 10 days. We may get a quick hitter, say Thursday or so next week, but for the most part, we're going to be a pretty dry and warm pattern once we get rid of this kind of rainy pattern and this cloudy pattern that we've been having. To look at March and spring, because we know that really the first half of March is going to kind of continue the warm trend we've seen over the winter time, we're really looking pretty strongly at odds being very, very strongly tilted towards above normal temperatures, not just in March, but also March through May. I mean, if you look at this, you can see, a 50% chance we're going to be in that top third of temperatures over the last 1981 to 2010 climate period, and only less than a 50% chance that we would be near normal or below normal. So pretty strong confidence that that's going to continue. But rainfall, we don't really have a clear predictive signal. We'll look at why that is moving forward here. As you look at what these outlooks really mean, I just want to kind of re-emphasize that, remember, what they do for these outlooks is they take the 30-year climate normal period from 1981 till 2010, and when they take that 30-year climate normal period, they put them in order from 1 to 30, and they take the top third, which I have here in green, which would be the above normal precipitation years, the middle third, which would be near normal precipitation years, and then the bottom third, which would be below normal precipitation years. So for instance, for San Antonio, their average is right around 8.42 inches, which falls in this near normal range, but really near normal is anywhere from about 6.5 inches to just over 9 inches. Anything over, say, 10 inches or 9 inches would be above normal. Anything below 6 inches would be below normal. But you can see, based on the black elements that I have circled here, the black circles represent all the neutral years during this 30-year climate normal period. So you can see that it's 8 on the left side, 8 on the right side, there's 6 in the above normal, there's 6 in the near normal, and then there's 5 in the below normal. So there's really not a clear signal for precipitation with respect to ENSO, which generally speaking is one of our stronger climate predictors. So what they've gone with is equal chance, and as you see when I'm talking about here, I say equal chance. That just means that the odds are not tilted either way. It doesn't mean that this product doesn't have skill. It just means that we're not really sure based on past weather whether or not we're going to fall into that above or below normal category. When we look at the 3 and 4 week outlooks, you can see that the experimental product that's issued between 2 and 3 p.m. on Friday, so it'll come out tomorrow, also still shows that we're going to be above normal for temperatures and have a rainfall that's equal chance moving through the rest of March. Again, in this case, we only have 2 categories, so this is not a 3-category product. This is simply above or below, and in this case, if we have equal chance, it does mean that the skill for this product is not very good, so they don't pick either direction. I wanted to look at what spring temperatures are typically like following a warm winter, and so what I have circled here are the 10 winters that are the warmest ones we've had since 1980, and what you can see is that 9 of the 10 actually did end up having above normal temperatures in summer. There was only 1 in 2013 that did not. Even if you take the about a half a degree Fahrenheit per decade trend that we've been warming during spring over the last 4 decades or so, what you see is that even only 3 of them fall below and 7 of them are above. So pretty strong confidence based on just trends from both a long-term climate perspective and also trends on the short-term winter to spring perspective that most likely temperatures will continue to be above normal on average throughout the spring. And this has been interesting for freezes because our last freeze for most of the region was January 8th. That's the 2nd earliest at Austin, 3rd earliest at San Antonio, and 4th earliest at Del Rio. It's not to say we can't have another one, though I don't see one on the horizon for at least the next couple of weeks. But the latest freeze has typically been around the first week of April, except for some low-lying areas like Austin, Bergstrom, and maybe some areas in the hill country. So something to keep in mind there, but in general, just a pretty warm year, and in many cases was the warmest year for winter on record. When we look at spring precipitation following warm winters, you see that the March, April, May precipitation fell below normal 70% of the time we had a warm winter for those 10 warmest winters. But when you look at the 10 wettest winters, because this was one of the 10 wettest winters we've had since 1981 as well, you can see that there's a 50-50 split. So precipits, again, kind of difficult to predict. We have some pretty wet years here, including last year, because it was a pretty warm winter last year. We also have some pretty dry ones, so not a clear signal either way. So having said that, severe weather season is upon us. We can tell from spring that this is the primary period for all types of severe weather, with, of course, tornadoes being most prevalent in May, but also second most prevalent in March. So March, April, May are pretty big periods of time for the type of severe weather that can produce the greatest impacts, which would be tornadoes. Of course, we've already had quite a few tornadoes here in February back in an event we had the 3rd weekend of the month. I wanted to present a little bit of some research that came out last year that we couldn't use last spring but can now, and that's that when you look at what the ENSO phase is during winter, it turns out if we have a El Nino event in winter, you can just tell from this map that in general, there's not much in the way of a strong threat for a tornado outbreak. We do have kind of one event here for a weak El Nino that ends early, but for the most part, most of the country, except for maybe the northern plains and Oklahoma when an El Nino ends early, remain fairly calm. But whenever we have La Nina, regardless of whether or not it's a La Nina that eventually rebuilds back into La Nina, which we are not expecting, or a La Nina that transitions into an El Nino, which is a possibility this year, although typically we'd want to see a longer-term La Nina than the very short one we had, you can just tell from the map that we have a lot greater threat across the country of a tornado outbreak in a given year. The La Nina rebuilding pattern is the one that typically is responsible for the greatest super outbreaks we've had across the country, including 1974, the Xenia, Ohio tornado, 2011, which was a very active year all over with a pretty significant event in the South United States and in Oklahoma, in April and May of that year, and of course the May 99 Oklahoma City tornado. But when you go to La Nina to El Nino, the last time we had that was in 2012. It's a possibility we can end up getting that this year, although I still think it's going to remain neutral at least through summer, if not into fall. But we did have some cases almost in 97 and 09 that just barely missed the La Nina threshold that could also have been considered in this, but were not thrown in this as well. And of course, in 97 we had the Gerald tornado in May of that year. And along those lines, I just want to point out that when you do have a resurgent, when you do have a La Nina that's transitioning to an El Nino, we do have a black dot here, which means that in South Central Texas, there is a significant trend that you can get a tornado outbreak if this does end up panning out. So we don't know if we're going to go La Nina to El Nino. We do know that we are coming out of La Nina. We are going to at least be in neutral phase. So it is something to pay attention that we may have a little bit greater risk for a tornado outbreak moving forward into the spring, at least later in the spring. In addition, Jason running from the office also showed this, just looking at the number of tornadoes, which you can see in neutral years is highest, and straight line wind events, which during neutral years is highest, and then for hail, it's actually a second to La Nina. But the key take-home message here is that from the research that Jason's done and just looking at a prior project that Lee et al. Did last year, the key is that as we go through the season of spring, towards the second half of spring, we could have an enhanced risk of severe weather if, of course, we get the waves to come through and make that happen. I do want to point out that the CFS model is suggesting an active period of severe weather beginning in the middle of April. That's just coming into the predictive window, so we'll have to see how that evolves over time. March just has a couple quick hitters that don't look real significant at the current moment, but again, that can always change, just like the February event did ramp up pretty quickly. So for heavy rainfall and flooding, just want to point out that the words here are not correct, so you can ignore what I put there. But in general, these images are correct in that you can see that typically during a neutral year, we actually do have more flash flood events, but if you take out 3 of the years, 97, 2004, and 2007, the neutral La Nina would actually be quite similar. So this is really heavily influenced by 3 years. So we can get flash flood events, but you've also seen in the past what I've shown that there are many times where we're not very wet at all. In terms of the spring rainfall since 1950 for both Austin and San Antonio, you can see that the top 4 years are not neutral years. As a matter of fact, they're all El Nino years, which is, again, kind of interesting, the fact that El Nino during spring is not very common. And also with this 87 event, 6 out of 10 for Austin and 5 out of 10 did fall in the top 10 of wettest springs, and we have 6% of springs that are ENSO-neutral. So not really any enhancement of getting a lot of rainfall. Really would have to be in La Nina to expect that we would not get much rain during this time. So in that nature, we're really going to just keep normal threat for heavy rainfall and flooding. For river flooding, because of some slightly elevated levels east of Highway 281, we're going to go ahead and say that that will be slightly above normal for the next month or so, but should fall below normal, assuming we don't get a big heavy rainfall event with normal river flooding conditions expected west of Highway 281. But of course, this is a time of year when we start to have that threat increase. And then finally, for fire weather, we did have a pretty active fire weather season until about the last week or so, or 2 weeks. That fire weather season is very active up in Oklahoma and northwestern parts of Texas, and you can see from the significant wildland fire potential outlook over here on the right that much of West Texas and Oklahoma and southern Kansas is got above normal significant wildland fire potential. So we do have some areas that butt up right against that, including Val Verde County, which is in it, and so we're going to maintain above normal threat for fire weather for areas west of I-35, normal for areas east of I-35, and then eventually falling to normal levels with expected possibility of a near normal precip year, although it could fall into the above or below normal category. Of course, if we do end up getting some dry fronts, we don't get a lot of rain, that will change, but rain and moisture levels, despite having a very warm winter, were actually quite high for this winter, so that's kept our fire weather threat much further below what we probably thought it would have been 3 months ago. Just to kind of give you a quick sneak preview for summer, our next call will be the first or second Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. and we'll see whether or not the potential for El Nino has increased or decreased, what that has implications for our summer weather and also for our hurricane seasonal outlook. Right now, continued above normal temperatures just because of long-term trends and short-term trends, and then precipitation is still equal chance. So having said that, this is just a quick summary, and I'll take any questions you may have on email or in chat.